It's an honor to meet you. I'm a
Likewise.
fan.
Oh, likewise, Kelly. I love horror fuel. I'm very happy to be talking to you.
Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing that. So, you've done so many films. What is it that kind of keeps drawing you back to the genre?
Well, the horror genre, ever since I was a child, it's always fascinated me. I watched grown-up scary movies when I was a little kid, and I drew no distinction between them and fairy tales. So Hansel and Gretel and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre were kind of the same to me. And I'm scared by real life, but horror movies I find to be like a really safe way to talk about stuff that is really troubling to us. So when Jeff Goldblum was turning into a giant fly in David Cronenberg's classic, I was crying. I was so terribly moved by it. But I also felt like that movie was talking about stuff that is very, very hard for us to talk about in real life, like death and decay. At the time, the AIDS virus was decimating people, I think that the genre, it is evergreen for me. I continually go back to it and I'm continually surprised by it. And I feel like there's no end to it because there's no end to the sorts of things that frighten us in real life that horror movies can provide comfort for.
Amen. Okay, I'm going to ask you a hard question.
Sure.
What's your favorite horror movie?
John Carpenter's The Thing is my favorite horror movie because it's a combination of things. It's like Rob Bottin's spectacular monsters, like they can be anything, and it's constantly transforming. So when you're watching that movie, you don't even know what the thing looks like because it's continually forming into these new shapes. But then there's also this deep paranoia in the movie where you don't know if you can trust the person standing next to you. You don't know if that person is friend or foe, if that friend is safe or not. And the other thing that's great about the thing is they're all a bunch of blue collar guys, and
Right.
dudes are notoriously unable to talk about their feelings. If it were a bunch of women, they would have sorted it out in like 2 seconds, because they would have talked to each other, listened, figured out who the thing was, destroyed it, and gotten on with the rest of their lives. But because it's a bunch of dudes, it's like, where's the thing? We'll kick the shit out of it. Which is a delight to watch. And also, Kurt Russell and Keith David are such brilliant actors. And I love the characters in that story. And John Carpenter's filmmaking is so profound. Now, John Carpenter's The Thing, in some ways it did influence the style of Mortuary Assistant because John Carpenter shoots in widescreen, which we also did. The aspect ratio is 2:3:5, so you're using the full frame, which means that there can be scary things that are coming from the left or from the right. And if I'm over here and I'm looking down this way, but you see something coming behind me, widescreen is so good for that. And the thing was inspirational in those ways. And the other thing that was great about that movie before the thing starts erupting is that there are all these beautiful shots that are traveling down hallways, as you're exploring the geography of the camp, and you're wondering when the stuff is going to happen. And the anticipation of future horror is in some ways scarier than the horror itself. And I might add that our director of photography for the Mortuary Assistant, Kevin Duggan, was a camera operator for Dean Cundey, who shot The Thing and Jurassic Park and so many other great movies. And so when Kevin and I started working together, we definitely nerded out about Dean Cundey as a cinematographer, The Thing in particular, and how we wanted to incorporate some of John Carpenter and Dean Cundey's elements into our story. So it's not lost on us that some of our shots traveling down corridors are inspired by a beloved film and a beloved director of photography that we admire.
All right. And there's something else that the film has in common with the thing. It's that sense of isolation.
That's right. You are alone in the mortuary assistant. You are trapped, you're locked in, it's the middle of the night, and there is nowhere to go, you know? And even if you got outside, you're still always inside your head, which is where the monsters go. The monsters in our movie, they attack you in your head, they kill you in your heart. And I thought that the demons in Brian Clark's game, they reminded me a lot of depression and suicidal ideation and addiction, real issues that people grapple with. And I thought the demons were terrifying because they're grounded in something that we can identify in our reality. It's like real pain that people suffer in life. Like I personally am not afraid of death, but I am afraid of suffering and I am afraid of pain. And once we get used to the fact that the dead in and of themselves can't hurt us, they It's more the living thing, the living entities inside of this location that are trying to infiltrate Rebecca Owens that will kill her in her heart. And anybody who's played the game knows that survival is not guaranteed in the Mortuary Assistant.
Right, right. I mean, I love the way that the not creatures, but the demon.
Yeah.
I love the way it was designed.
Oh, wonderful.
I
Yeah.
found it very creepy, but it's like that borderline between something human and something that isn't,
Yeah.
and that kind of gets under your skin.
I know it does get under your skin. I like that you call them creatures. I mean, that's certainly the way that the special effects artist and I referred to these guys. Our special effects artist is Norman Cabrera, who's a brilliant artist. He was trained by Rick Baker. He's worked on wonderful films by Guillermo del Toro. Like I love Gremlins too. He designed Vegetable Gremlin, so like he's a great artist. And we did talk about the entities as characters. We didn't talk about them as ethereal things. We talked about them as existing in grounded three-dimensional reality. And the hero monster in our movie is called the Mimic, and it appears in the game. And what bothers me so much about that creature is its stillness, that is looking at you in a pervasive way. And again, like there's this sense of waiting. What is this thing going to do to you? And what is this thing thinking? And what is this thing ready to do to you? The wonderful actor who played the creature was Mark Steger from Stranger Things. And Mark is a remarkable physical actor. And I think this is very important. The thing that you touched on that I think is so true is that it's a human being playing this monster. So there is a twisted humanity inside of this monster. And any great monster in any great horror movie puts us in touch with the part of our humanity that is monstrous, that is scary, you know. So I think there's nothing more scary than a human being, and a monster, at least in our film, is like the distortion of a human being.
Right. And you mentioned special effects, which were great, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, and I don't really think it's a spoiler, but I've got to bring it up.
Bring
Those
it up.
close-ups of the skin were just, you know,
Oh, I can tell you how that effect was achieved, so when we were doing close-ups, we actually used a medical lens called the probe lens, that allowed us to get very, very, very close to the special effect. And it gets you right up close to the gnarliness of the special effect and the strangeness of the special effect. And I thought that that was something that was really translatable from the game to our film is that the game engages you in mortuary science. You are getting involved in all the gooey, sticky, messy parts of mortuary science. And by doing the shots that you're talking about, is a way for us to present to the streaming audience or the theater audience that feeling of getting close to medical science, and it is icky and it is gruey and, in its own way, in its own messy, nasty way, it's also strangely beautiful.
it is. It looked so good that it kind of, for a second, kind of had to stop. And I was like, how did they do that? Because I mean, you see a lot of skin in horror movies, tons
Sure.
of it, lots of wounds, but I don't think I've ever seen skin that was being cut look that good before.
Yeah, it was very carefully done by our special effects team. And I think that I know that I certainly like talked to a lot of morticians and studied mortuary science once I knew I was directing this film. We just wanted to make sure that like it was in the realm of plausibility and in the realm of honesty and truthfulness. We wanted it all to feel grounded and we wanted people to feel the bodies. So, Norman Cabrera, I'm sure that he dug into some medical journals and like I know for sure that he wanted to see pictures of all of the actors who were playing dead bodies because he wanted to very specifically match their exact skin tone, which is a dark art form in and of itself.
But like I said, it looked absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I'll let Norman know. He'll be very pleased to hear that it was like it looked very real.
Yeah, it did. It looked even with some of the organs, looked a little too real.
Yeah, a little, what's for dinner? Meatloaf.
Yeah, I think I'll skip dinner tonight. Um, so tell me, why did you want to adapt this game into a film? What's the the fire that, made you like, well, I've got to put it on screen.
Well, I don't think that I wanted to adapt a video game into a movie. I wanted to adapt this video game into a movie. When I was told about it, I immediately responded to the characters. I loved Rebecca Owens and I loved Raymond Delver and I loved the Mimic. I loved all of the creations of Brian Clark's game, and I also loved the total environment that he created. That isolated feeling that you were talking about. I think this location kind of pulls you into its world, and I found that so fascinating. And I thought that there were narrative elements in the game following Rebecca's journey that were translatable into a movie. And I don't think that's always the case with video games. Sometimes a video game is an experience because it is inherently a game that you are playing. It is not necessarily a story with characters. And sometimes video game adaptations, when they try to force some other element into it, it just feels wrong. It feels artificial. The gamers don't like it. They don't believe it. They just don't trust it. How can they trust the filmmakers when the filmmakers aren't trusting the inherent elements of the game? One of the movies that I saw that made me see how it could be done was Josh Rubin made a film called Werewolves Within, which was based on a game. And that movie works in and of itself from beginning to middle to end. You are invested in the characters, you're invested in the journey, you're invested in the werewolves, you're afraid of what's going to happen. And it's a very emotional journey because you get attached to the characters. And that's how I felt when I was playing the Mortuary Assistant. I fell in love with the characters in the game, and I wanted to play in that sandbox forever. And I wanted to translate that into, a narrative film. And it was very easy to do because Brian Clark's influences on the game were not other games. He was influenced by cinema. Brian is a big cinephile. He loves movies. And he wanted to kind of bring a movie feeling into the game. So when Epic Pictures Group said they wanted to turn this game into a movie, Brian saw that it wasn't too big of a stretch. He saw that there were elements of the game that could immediately be translated into a film. You know, I love the game, and I felt like we were able to honor the game and respect the game, and like all the ingredients from the game go in that we can fit into a narrative story. And if it fits the story that we're telling, it stays in. But if it's not supported by the narrative, then it falls by the wayside. There were 5 different endings to the game. We had to pick the one that we responded to the most. And I think that the way we picked it was saying we are telling Rebecca Owens' story. It's her journey. It's her going from a place of like not wanting to confront her demons to being forced to becoming a hero and taking them dead on.
Right,
And and like I said, anybody who's played the game knows that like just because Rebecca's fighting back doesn't mean that she's necessarily going to make it.
right. And it was she has a fantastic character. And I love that she's not some like straight out of the gate badass.
Yeah.
That she's got all of these traumas and all of the addiction and all of that, and she is having to face that as she goes along. But I love seeing a character that comes out strong after starting off weak.
Yeah, and I think that's very human because we're also vulnerable. Like just life comes at us and we're all doing the best we can. And like people who go through the program Narcotics Anonymous, they are literally taking it one day at a time. And I think that those people, they are truly heroic because like if you are undergoing a struggle every day and you are a shy, scared person and you are showing up and doing your best, that is heroism to me, and I identify with that kind of a person way more than a person who solves the problem by punching out the villain so easily. Like I don't know who that person is. Like it's fun to watch that stuff and that's escapism, but in terms of identification, I identify way more with the person who is afraid and goes in anyway and has to be brave even though she doesn't want to. Like that to me is a way more accessible character, and I love her for it. And I think Willa Holland's performance captures that vulnerability and that sensitivity and the strength that is like deep inside of that character.
She's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, she was great in the film.
And I love that vulnerability and that, she's still trying to be good, and she's trying, to do her best.
Yeah,
Life's hard.
life's hard.
And
Yeah,
for her,
like,
life just got a whole lot harder.
yeah, Rebecca Owens does not have an easy life, and yet she's facing it, she's doing her best. And that's what I liked about the Narcotics Anonymous scene is like for a person who does not really feel comfortable speaking in public, she is showing up. She is showing up and trying, you know. And it's hard to try when things are coming right at you, you know. Like when things are coming right at you all the time, it is hard to try it. There are times when you just want to give up. And that's what the demons are counting on. And I think that's the central conflict of the film that made it worth doing for me. I think that's the thing that makes the Mortuary Assistant special, is that it's a character that you know like she wants to solve the problems, and she's working her butt off to do it. And it's not easy. Nothing is easy when you're trying to make it from one day to the next.
Right. I understand that. What are some of the little touches from the games that, viewers might get surprised by?
Well, keep your eyes peeled and look in the corners of the frame because you will find a lot from the game. We never wanted to stop the movie to show and highlight an Easter egg. We wanted to keep the story moving. Like the film is 91 minutes long, and we wanted to keep it at a pace. So we didn't want to stop and say, "Hey, look at this Easter egg right here." Those things happen while Rebecca is going about her business. While she is facing down these demons. But that said, like when we were designing the set, we took a look at the game. And I remember the first time I played the game, one of the things that I loved that made me go, oh, this is going to be a very unique environment, is that in the embalming room, there's a red lamp, and I was like, oh, that's fantastic because that makes it feel, like I immediately saw that red lamp and said, oh, this is not just Autopsy of Jane Doe all over again. This is going to be uniquely its own thing, uniquely its own world that like is just straight from the mind of Brian Clark. And I got to say, it was very special, like having the game creator come and visit the set. He was there for the entire duration of principal photography, but when he walked on the set, imagine like dreaming up a world and animating it and creating it as a gameplay, and then walking in and seeing it as a three-dimensional reality, and then seeing there's Rebecca Owens wearing the wardrobe, and there's Raymond Delver with his hair just like it is in the game. It was very astonishing for Brian. It's and a unique experience for him, something that he dreamed up in his head being translated into three-dimensional reality. And he spotted all the Easter eggs. He I think tried to like sneak some home with him. He may have some in his office right now. So I hope you're enjoying them, Brian. But we loved planting all of the Easter eggs in the corners of the frame.
Well, that's awesome. And I couldn't imagine, doing that walking, going from a game to walking in and there's, the world in 3D.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's got to be just an amazing feeling. And just knowing that somebody loved the story enough to make a film out of it.
Yeah, we didn't want to leave. When we wrapped principal photography, we just wanted to keep going. We would have stayed playing in that sandbox for as long as we could, you know. And who knows, if audiences respond to this film and if they love it, then we would be certainly happy to continue telling more stories in the world of the Mortuary Assistant. Brian and I have already been hatching some schemes. We wouldn't want to tell the same story any more than if he created a game for Mortuary Assistant 2, he would want the same thing to happen. He wants there to be unique new adventures, but within the world of the Mortuary Assistant, which I'm here for. Anytime, any place, Brian Clark, I'm ready to go. I absolutely loved making this movie. We're so proud of it, and we're so happy to share it with audiences. And if they feel the same way, then they'll respond to the film in the spirit from which it was made, which was with great care.
Right. I mean, I love the movie. And you brought up the Autopsy of Jane Doe. And that
Sure.
happens to be one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Isn't Brian Cox fantastic in it? You give
It
such a
is,
great
yeah.
performance. Yeah.
But I can definitely say it's very different. There's a completely different story. And I appreciate that because we don't get that environment often.
That's right.
You know, being in a mortuary and bad things happening. But I can only think of maybe just two films are set there.
Yeah, and then maybe you could throw Reanimator into that mix as well. It's not quite the same environment, but there is a morgue and there are corpses that are getting reanimated, you know.
Right.
And I love Reanimator. I think it's a great, great movie. Like if anybody wanted to do a double bill, Reanimator would be the fun, splattery one, and we would be the dark, serious one, you know. But I'm
I
a big
love
fan of Stuart Gordon, and I loved that film. We couldn't really use Reanimator as a reference for this movie because its tone is so different. But I loved being a strange bedfellow to that film as well.
Well, it's great, and I love the little details. The characters are fantastic.
Oh yeah,
I mean, and the special effects, were top notch.
yeah. Thank you.
So, I mean, I will forever. I think it scarred me just a little bit. Like, I've got that little bit of trauma from the skin scenes, and I don't. I mean, I'm
Well,
hard to affect, but it got me.
we'll see you in your nightmares.
Oh, but it's a fantastic film, and I'm so excited that people get the chance to live in both worlds.
Yeah, if people are unfamiliar with the game, if they see the film and like it, then they can go interact with that world by playing the game. And if people loved the game and want to see it translated into a narrative form, then we are a companion to the game. It's one of those things where much like the Last of Us series, which can take side detours and explore narrative elements that can't be done in a game. Those two things exist side by side, but they do exist in the same universe. That was very clear. Like we never did anything that contradicted the world of the game, and that was very important to us.
And still, it serves well as a standalone film.
That's
You
exactly
know what you understand it, you know what's going on. It's very clearly explained, which is awesome. It's easy to follow, and it's just if you're not a gamer, then you can just enjoy the movie.
that's right. Yes, we wanted the movie to be a movie, in and of itself. You don't have to play the game to understand the film.
Right, right, and that's great because often with these adaptions, things get a little too attached.
It's possible, it's one of those things where, like if somebody really, really, really loves the game, it's understandable how like they would want to try to incorporate every single element of the game. And I'm guilty of that as well. Like there was a scene in the game that I was extremely passionate about. And I told Brian, I was like, look, if we ever get to go again, I want to make sure that that scene gets in this film. But I'll leave it for audiences who have played the game to know which scene I'm talking about. It's an unforgettable scene in the game. It's like easily my favorite. And it was one of those things where it was like, all right, that's too much of Raymond's story. And we're really concentrating on Rebecca in this one. But if we get the opportunity to play again, maybe we can explore a little bit more of Raymond's stories and unlock some of his mysteries.
Yeah, I'd love to see that origin story.
Me too. I would love to see an origin story for Raymond. He's one of my favorite characters.
It's just fantastic. It's a great movie, and I can't wait for people to see it so I can talk about it in detail.
Likewise.
So, but like I said, it's fantastic and such a great movie and so dark. Let me give you a compliment real quick, if
Sure.
as if I hadn't given you enough. Um, I love that it's dark, but it's not too dark to see. That's a big pet peeve for me.
Oh, this is huge. I'm so happy you brought this up. I'm glad we're talking about this before we wrap it up. Because if you watch some scenes in Game of Thrones and in Alien versus Predator Requiem, you cannot tell what is going on, and that drives me bananas. So like when talking to the director of photography, Kevin Duggan, we one of the first things we talked about was if we are doing darkness, then we also want to make sure that the audience sees within the darkness the thing that we want them to see. This is crucial, you know. I think that if you just do a wash of darkness, then you can't see a damn thing. You can't even see a mystery. You're just like, I don't know what's going on, and that can be very confusing if like you're trying to show the viewer like some narrative elements. So I'm really happy that you brought that up because we were very painstakingly aware that we wanted to have the darkness give us a sense of mystery, but we also wanted the audience to be able to very specifically see the things that we wanted them to see within the darkness. This is very important because horror movies exist in the dark. We are afraid of the dark. We are afraid of the mysteries of the dark. But we also don't want to be frustrated by the dark and stumbling around in the dark because that is not a pleasant viewing experience. And if you're just like hearing caterwauling and don't know what's going on, that's not fun. So I'm very happy that you brought that up. It was something that was very, very important to us while making the movie.
Yeah, the perfect example is looking down that staircase
Yeah,
where you can still see, it's really dark, but you can still see that bottom step.
that's right.
And thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. That was for you and for everybody like you and me who care about that.
Well, it's amazing. And it has been such a pleasure talking to you. You are
Likewise, it's
just
been a total joy.
fantastic. And hopefully we'll get to talk again sometime if there's a sequel. Just
From your
see.
lips to the demon's ears.
There you go. All right. Well, you have a great day, okay?
You too. It was amazing talking to you.
You too. Thank you.